So if you remember from my last video, Wiggles really didn't like the back cinch. Today I sucked it into him right off the start to where I would have it if I was roping and asked him to walk off. My goal here is to keep him from reacting to it but still have it tight right off the start. So I ask him to first walk and then transition up to a trot once he's a little bit warmed up, and then a lope. But I won't ask him to lope right off the start because we don't want to make a habit out of bucking. My intentions for this session are to put a ride on Wiggles, see where he's at for riding, and get him to respond to bringing his head in and down with the bit. Don't mind me walking around with a bit of a limp, but I have an ankle injury from when I hit the ground earlier this week off of a different horse. But anyways, this is where we ended up with his first loping strides today after he was saddled. He was such a good boy today and took it really well. And because I had it sucked into him so tight off the start, it left me a little bit of room to drop it a couple holes before getting on, since obviously we're not roping anything today. Here I'm just asking him if he remembers what we worked on the other day, which is giving to the halter pressure down and laterally to both sides. This horse really likes to push into pressure and resist it, but for details on these exercises, check out my previous video. He did definitely remember a lot from the other day and responded really well to these exercises and figured them out much quicker than the first time I introduced him to them. He still didn't really love giving his head to the sides, so I might start introducing some stretches to get him more comfortable with bending that way. I had a question from someone on how I bridle a horse, so I figured I'd throw that into this video as well. So this is how I bridle a horse, and this is also the first time I've bridled this horse, so I don't know his secrets yet. First I take off the halter and usually just drape it over their neck like that so it's out of the way. Then I take the top in my right hand. Yes, I just had to make an L with my hand so I knew which hand it was. And I lay the bit in my left hand. And then I just rest my hand over their head between their ears, hang it down in front of their nose, bring it up to their mouth, and if I have to, I'll stick my thumb in the corner of their mouth. And then you can pull it up with your right hand. Once they take it, fold their ears under one at a time gently. And we're gonna have to make some adjustments on this bridle. And then just do up the throat latch. That's all there is to it. Here before getting on, I just made sure he was gonna respond to the bit. As he was getting used to it, I just double checked that I had some whoa and some turning. He responded to this really well, even though he was mouthing the bit and wasn't too sure about it. And so once I was confident we had some buttons, I figured I could hop on. Now I do not support riding in slip-on shoes, but my ankle still looks like a purple potato and is too swollen to fit in my boots. And alas, we still have work to do. I started by just asking him to gently walk off. And like I said, one of my intentions for this session was to get him collecting and bringing his head in with the bit pressure, and so we spent a lot of time working on that. So to ask them to bring their head down, I just kind of wiggle my hands back and forth alternating, and you can see he's super resistant to it off the start, kind of throwing his head up and tossing his head. I just kept the pressure on and kept asking until eventually he gave his head to me. Right there he gave a little bit of try, and so I released the pressure and then asked again. Then he started figuring it out and I was able to get his head down. We repeated this a bunch of times, and after he understood it, we started adding in backing up. Again, off the start, he was pretty resistant to the pressure and moving his feet backwards. But once he gives in and does what you're asking, right there, then you can just release the pressure and give him a pet. Again, we just played around with this a bunch of times till he figured out the idea. He did quite well with this. I think he has potential to be a horse that's quite light in the face. I also just walked and trotted him around a bunch to get him used to having someone on his back again. It has been a while since he's been ridden, so we're just easing him back into it. My goal is to set him up for success by not asking too much, which, like I said in my previous video, is why I kind of start from the very basics and meet them where they're at. I threw in some stopping and backing up while we were riding around just to change things up and make sure he remembered what we were working on. Then, just like last time, hopped off and unsaddled in the same space that we were working so that he doesn't see his barn as the finishing point. And that's where we ended our session today.